also focus it more precisely and shoot it, say, in a fairly narrow beam. You can shoot it across the street and into somebody else's house. It'll penetrate the walls, but it'll be absorbed in tissue, and it'll be sensed as a form of discomfort, depending on the strength of the signal and how often you use it and how constant. It can be an extreme discomfort. It can actually leave burn marks.
Okay, because a lot of people I know that are targets wake up with that, and they've had pieces of skin burned off and removed. Now, I know I've had it, and I actually got rid of my microwave. I'm a microwave-free home, and I'm not getting the zapping as much anymore or anything like that. So people really want to know that the microwave in your own home can be used against you, and I advise everyone to get rid of it. Do what you can to get rid of it. You also referenced a lot of different weapons in your newsletter. The Professional Paranoid newsletter. I loved it. It's very informative. Can you go over some of those weapons, such as InfoWar and technology, such as InfoWar, psychotronic war, weather war, psyops, and tell us a little bit about it, because a lot of these things that you referenced are being used right now against citizens in their own homes. As we discussed, especially RATS, R-A-A-T-S. You really you emphasize that in your newsletter.
Yeah, RATS that's a very insidious one. I don't think it's used quite so much that we know about. I think it's such an interesting weapon. They don't dare let it be recovered or demonstrated as being in use. So I think it's really used for very selective missions. But there are other technologies which do the same thing, which are less susceptible to that risk, and they certainly do use them against more regular folks, so to speak. But RATS is a radio auditory assaultive technology or transmitting system. I think I got that right.
Yeah, you did.
That was developed by Catherine Kelly at the University of Albany in New York in the early to mid-'90s and beyond, with as much as a $2 billion a year funding by the DOD. I happen to have talked earlier, before I even knew about the existence of RATS, with a professor who said that at one point the DOD had approached him about possibly doing some experiments, and that they particularly wanted him to recruit for the experiments Islamics. Well, so now what this little RATS thing does is it's implanted behind the ear. It takes an injection. They do it while you're under anesthesia or otherwise out cold, which means that, if they can get into your home while you're asleep or stage an auto accident, get you out of the hospital or whatnot, they can then plant it without your knowledge. And what it does is it allows them to intercept the brain waves and radio them out. And the brain waves are signal processed to isolate those brain waves that represent the little voice in your head when you talk to yourself. So, you say, I'm going to pick up this cup of coffee and take a drink. You don't put it in so many words, but you kind of think, oh, I like coffee, and you reach for it and you take a drink. You hear, if you stop and think about it, you actually hear yourself say that to yourself for every little thing that you do. Or if somebody asks you a question, you formulate the answer in your mind before you actually say it. You use your little voice. And if you're just thinking about solving a problem, you use your little voice to argue with yourself about the pros and cons of a solution. So that little voice is captured and analyzed and is literally played back to whoever's sitting at the other end of the receiver. They can then talk to you using this device. Radio waves are received by the device and transmitted to a voice only you can hear. This is one of many family of what's called voice-to-skull technologies, also known and inspired the name by the Soviets as the voice of God, which cannot be disobeyed. So I put it to you now, if you stick that into the ear of an Islamic person, and he believes it to be the voice of God, what might you command that person to do that would be beneficial to you? Well, no, keep in mind that all terrorism has never, ever benefited the power base which espoused the terrorism. It's only caused a backlash and caused more harm and suffering to the people that relied upon the terrorism. However, the victims, so-called, of terrorism, those in control of that country have always benefited because they were able to pass legislations or laws which restricted the rights of the people in favor of protecting them from this terrorism. So we use terrorism as a means of gaining political control and waxing more towards a police state. So it's absolutely in government's best interest, if they want to perpetuate their government and its power over the people, to have terrorism. And that's why Operation Northwoods was developed by the Department of Defense. And they were going to stage acts of terrorism against the United States in order to justify a war against Cuba. They were going to hijack planes and blow them up. They were going to blow up American buildings. They were going to assassinate citizens on the street and blame it on the Cubans. And this seems to be the perfect model of what happened on September 11th. So I'm very skeptical, especially when if you want to get me started on a topic, let's talk about my book's Fatal Rebirth sometime, and we'll talk about September 11th, and we'll ask questions like, well, why did the nose blow up on that jet plane when it managed to survive penetrating the South Tower? It then completely blew up into pieces no smaller than a piece of paper. Well, what caused it to blow up when all that was in there was passengers and luggage?
Well, I would love to talk to you about that. I'm going to look at that book and schedule another interview with you, because I really believe that there's more behind 9/11 than just Osama bin Laden. I believe it was an inside job. So we will have to talk about that in the future, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and so anyway, the RATS is the voice of God, and it seems to have been developed for that type of technology. But it's very insidious, and it can be used on anybody without their knowledge, and all of a sudden they'll just start hearing voices. They'll think they're crazy at first, but they'll be afraid to talk to anybody. If they do talk to anybody, they'll be told they're crazy. And the psychiatric industry is really complicit in the whole thing, because they refuse to believe that there's any such technology when we have all kinds of patents and other proofs that not only the rats, but dozens of other technologies can simulate voice-to-skull effects.
How do you shield yourself from that? If someone gets in your home while you're sleeping at night, and I know I've had invasion in my home at night, and you get injected, is it a small chip behind your ear? Is it liquid that goes in behind your ear? What is it? And how do you shield yourself from it? How do you get it out of behind your ear? Is what I'm trying to say is, how do you get rid of it? What do you do? Or are you stuck with it permanently?
Well, bioimplants as a general topic is one that we are still learning on. Just the other day, I learned probably as much as I've known in the prior 10 years, because of a set of actual recovered implants. That's always been the problem, is you could never get the medical industry, just like the psychiatric industry is complicit. The medical industry would refuse, absolutely refuse, even to show you an X-ray that would reveal the existence of an implant, much less give you the X-ray. To my entire knowledge, there's only maybe 3 actual genuine X-rays of implants in our possession collectively that people have managed to finagle. But then they also will refuse to do any surgery, because I believe that at some point in their training they are told, well, if you ever encounter one of these cases, this is a matter of national security, and this is what you're supposed to do. Never been able to confirm that, but everybody has that suspicion. You simply cannot get them to be removed. But we had somebody who was able to get them removed,